The bridge of the waking serpent. The air over the ancient Naga bridge hung thick and wet, a heavy blanket woven from the drone of a million cicadas. I had been driving for hours, leaving the dust and noise of Phnom Penh behind for the forgotten temples of Pre-Vihia province. My work, documenting the decay of Khmer architectural wonders before they crumbled entirely, often led me to places like this, places that felt unstuck in time. This bridge, Spion Neak Reach, wasn't on any tourist map. I'd found it mentioned in a faded French colonial survey, a single line describing a marvel of engineering spanning a nameless Blackwater river. The heat was a physical weight on my shoulders. Sweat traced paths through the red dust caked on my skin. I left my moto by the side of the overgrown path and approached the bridge on foot. It was magnificent, not as grand as the ones at Angkor, but more alive, more primal. 7-headed Nagas flared at its entrance, their stone faces pitted and green with moss, their expressions a mixture of serene protection and coiled menace. It felt less like a structure and more like a creature at rest. I stepped onto the laterite path, my modern trainers sounding loud against the ancient stone. The jungle pressed in on all sides, a wall of green so dense it swallowed the light. The river below was slow and opaque, the colour of strong black coffee. I walked to the centre, the highest point of the arch, and rested a hand on the moss-slick balustrade. The stone was cool, almost vibrating with the thrum of the cicadas. It felt like laying a hand on the flank of some colossal, sleeping animal. I traced the curve of a carved scale, marvelling at the artistry. My fingers dislodged a small, loose piece of the carving, no bigger than my thumb. It wasn't intentional, it just let go. The stone fell from my hand, a tiny grey speck against the vast green, and clattered into the dark water below. The splash was insignificant. But the jungle fell instantly silent. The drone of the cicadas, the chittering of unseen monkeys, the calls of birds, it all vanished. Not faded away, but cut off as if a switch had been thrown. The silence was absolute, a crushing pressure in my ears. It was the most unnatural sound I had ever heard. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the sudden void. Then came the smell. It coiled up from the depths of the river, thick and cloying. An ancient smell like rotting lotus blossoms and disturbed river mud, the scent of decay and stagnant water. It filled my lungs and I gagged, stumbling back from the edge. That's when I felt it. A low, resonant hum began to vibrate up through the soles of my shoes. It wasn't an earthquake. An earthquake is a violent shudder, a chaotic roar from the earth. This was different. It was a single, pure note, a structural groan that felt less like shifting earth and more like a waking breath. The entire bridge seemed to thrum with it, a deep, organic resonance that I felt in my bones, in my teeth. I forced myself to look over the edge, my logical mind scrabbling for an explanation. A sinkhole, a current shift, but the immense shadow cast by the bridge was all that moved. It lay upon the black water like a strip of void, but it was elongating and contracting against the slow current, pulsing gently, as if it were a body stretching after a long slumber. I stared, mesmerized and terrified, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The shadow was wrong. It wasn't behaving like a shadow should. It seemed to have a weight, a presence of its own. Then came the grinding of stone on stone. It was a deep, grating sound, the sound of immense weight shifting, and it wasn't coming from the foundations beneath me. It was coming from the very path I stood upon. I looked down. The intricately paved stones of the bridge floor were moving, not all of them, but in a slow, undulating pattern, like the scales on the back of a snake. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat. I just turned and ran. I fled back the way I came, my feet slipping on the slick moss, the grinding sound seeming to chase me, the silent jungle watching me go. I didn't stop until I reached my moto, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit it into the ignition. As I sped away, kicking up a plume of red dust, I risked one last look in my mirror. The bridge was still there, ancient and silent, looking exactly as it had when I arrived. But I knew that something in that place, or the place itself, was awake, and it knew I was the one who had woken it. Back in the small town, in the relative safety of my rented guesthouse room, I tried to rationalize it. The heat, I told myself, dehydration. The jungle plays tricks on the mind. The grinding was probably the stones settling, the silence just a freak natural occurrence. But I couldn't explain the smell or the impossible movement of the shadow. I couldn't shake the feeling of that deep, vibrating hum. It felt like it was still resonating in my chest. The guesthouse owner, a wiry man named Bongsarith with kind, worried eyes, brought me a bowl of hot kai tea. He must have seen how pale I was. You explore the old places today, Bong Sothia? He asked, setting the steaming bowl on the small wooden table. Yes, Bong, I said, my voice a little hoarse. I went east along the old river path. I found an incredible bridge, Spian Neek Reach. The smile on his face vanished. He physically took a step back, his hand making a small, almost unconscious gesture of warding. He glanced around the room, as if afraid someone might have overheard. You should not go there, he whispered, his voice tight. That is not a place for men from the city. It is a place of sleep. It is best to let it sleep. What do you mean? I pressed, my journalistic curiosity overriding my fear. Is there a story about it? He hesitated, wiping his hands on his apron. There are always stories, Bong, old stories. My grandmother, she used to say that bridge is not made of stone. Not really. It is a promise sealed in the body of a queen. He shook his head, looking at the floor. It is not my place to say more. Please, eat your soup. And tomorrow maybe explore the temples to the west. They are safer. He left without another word, closing the door softly behind him. His fear was palpable. It seeped into the room, more chilling than the weak air conditioner rattling in the window. A promise sealed in the body of a queen. The words echoed in my mind. That feeling I had that the bridge was a resting creature. It wasn't just my imagination. Someone else felt it too. That night, sleep offered no escape. I dreamt I was standing on the bridge again, but it was night, and the only light came from a sickly green moon. The black water of the river was churning, and from it rose 2 points of light like glowing embers. They rose higher and higher. And I realized they were eyes. Immense reptilian eyes set in a head the size of a truck, a head carved from mossy stone and living flesh. The Naga balustrades on the bridge turned their 7 heads towards me, their stone lips pulling back to reveal fangs. The bridge beneath my feet began to coil, lifting me into the air. I was trapped on the back of a waking god, and it was angry. I woke up shouting, drenched in a cold sweat. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would break through my ribs. The room was dark, save for the faint moonlight filtering through the shutters. And the smell was there, faint but unmistakable, the scent of rotting lotus and river mud. I scrambled out of bed, turning on the light, my eyes darting into every corner. The room was empty. But on the floor by the side of my bed was a small wet patch of dark river mud, shaped exactly like a bare footprint. My footprint. The next morning I knew I couldn't leave. Not yet. Bong Sarith's fear and my nightmare had solidified my resolve. This wasn't just a spooky experience anymore. It was something real, something tied to the history of this place. I had to understand it. Ignoring the guest house owner's worried glances, I asked him where the oldest Wat in the area was. He told me reluctantly about Wat Phnom Krolan, a small pagoda perched on a nearby hill, tended by a single, very old monk. The path to the Wat was steep and lined with crumbling statues of devas and asuras. The air grew stiller, heavier with the scent of burning incense and jasmine blossoms. I found the head monk sweeping fallen leaves from a stone courtyard. He was ancient, his skin like wrinkled parchment stretched over a delicate frame, but his eyes were sharp and clear. I introduced myself, explained my work, and offered the small donation I had brought. You are Sothia, the man from the city who is looking at old stones, he said. It wasn't a question. News travels fast in a small village. You have troubled eyes. I took a breath. There was no point in being evasive. Lok Tar, I began, using the respectful term for an elder monk. I visited Spian Neek Reach yesterday. The sweeping stopped. He turned to face me fully, his gaze intense. He didn't show fear like Bong Sarith, but a deep, profound sadness. Ah, he said softly, so the sleep is broken. He gestured for me to sit on a stone bench in the shade of a large bodhi tree. He sat opposite me, his saffron robes a startling splash of colour against the grey stone. That bridge, he began, his voice a low, raspy whisper, is older than any temple in this province. It was not built by any king we remember. It was a bargain. Long ago, a great Khmer king was fleeing a Cham invasion. His army was broken, his family scattered. He came to that river, a torrent in those days, with the enemy closing behind him. He had no way to cross. As dusk fell, he prayed. He prayed to the spirits of the land, the Neek, the great serpents who rule the waters. He promised them anything if they would deliver him, and a Neek queen answered. Her name was Ning Sovan, the Golden Lady. She was the largest and most powerful of all the Naga in the region. She rose from the water, her scales shimmering like 1,000 sunsets, and she spoke to the king. The monk closed his eyes as if reciting a story he had told 100 times. She offered him a deal. She would lay her own body across the chasm, forming a bridge for him and his men to escape. She would remain there in that form, a guardian of the crossing, for 1,000 years. But such a sacrifice requires a balance, a life for a life. Once every generation, when the waters run low and the moon is dark, a life must be given to the river in her name. An offering. To feed her spirit and honor her pact. A cold dread trickled down my spine. What kind of offering? In the old days it was a water buffalo. Sometimes something more, the monk said, his eyes meeting mine. The village elders knew the rituals, they knew the signs, they kept the balance. But after the wars, after the Khmer Rouge, so much of the old knowledge was lost. The rituals were forgotten, the offering stopped, the queen was left to sleep and to hunger. But she's just a story, right? I asked, my modern mind rebelling. A legend to explain a bridge. A legend is the memory of a truth, my son, he said gently. You stood on her body, you felt her stir, the stone you knocked into the water, it was like knocking out a tooth, a small thing but a great insult, an awakening. She is a protector, but she is also a predator. And a predator, once woken, must hunt. She has been starved for a very long time. He paused, and his next words chilled me to my soul. She has your scent now. The river mud in your room was not a dream. It was a marking. She has tasted your spirit. I left the Wat in a daze. The monk's words were insane, the stuff of fireside ghost stories my Yai used to tell me. And yet every part of it felt true. The vibrating hum, the grinding stones, the moving shadow. It was the slow, waking stretch of a colossal creature. The promise of a queen. I had to get out. I drove back to the guest house, my mind racing. I would pack my things, get on my moto, and I would not stop driving until I saw the familiar, chaotic lights of Phnom Penh. I wouldn't look back. As I was throwing my clothes into my bag, my phone rang. It was my friend Rith, an engineer in the city. His cheerful, logical voice was a lifeline to the world I understood. Bong Sothia, how is the jungle? Found any cool old rocks yet? He joked. I tried to sound normal, but my voice was strained. It's interesting, Rith. Listen, I think I'm coming back a few days early. Everything okay? You sound weird. And it all came spilling out. The bridge, the silence, the smell, the monk's story. I told him everything. I expected him to be concerned. Instead, he laughed. Whoa, slow down, man, he said, still chuckling. Sounds like you've got a case of jungle fever. A Naga queen who is the bridge. Come on, it's probably just seismic activity. Or the foundations are unstable. You're an architect, you know how that stuff works. Don't let these village ghost stories get to you. His words should have been comforting, a splash of cold, rational water. But they weren't. They just made me feel more alone. He couldn't understand, he wasn't there. He didn't feel that hum in his bones. You're right, I lied, forcing a calm tone. I'm probably just tired, too much sun. Exactly, get some rest. Call me when you're back in the city, we'll get some beer. We hung up, the silence of the room rushed back in. Rith was wrong, and the monk was right. The Naga had my scent, leaving wouldn't be enough. An unpaid debt doesn't just disappear. I looked at my bag, half-packed. Running felt like the act of prey, and I knew with a certainty that defied all logic that the predator would enjoy the chase. I had to go back. It was the stupidest decision of my life, but I felt an undeniable pull, a grim compulsion. I had to see it again to confirm that I wasn't crazy. Maybe a small, foolish part of me thought, if I went back and apologized, showed respect, it would be enough. My Yai always said that spirits, no matter how angry, understood respect. I waited for dusk, the time the monk said the veil between worlds was thin. The drive back to the bridge was surreal. The jungle, which had seemed so vibrant and alive before, now felt watchful and sinister. The air grew heavy and cold as I approached. I parked the moto in the same spot, my hands clammy on the handlebars. The cicadas were silent. The jungle was holding its breath, waiting. I walked onto the bridge. The air was thick with that cloying smell of lotus and mud. The hum was back, but it wasn't just in the stone anymore. It was in the air, a deep, guttural vibration that seemed to come from all directions at once. It sounded like a chant. I walked to the center, to the spot where I had dropped the stone. I looked down at the black water. The shadow of the bridge was there, but it was darker than before, an absolute black that seemed to drink the fading light. And it was moving more noticeably now, swaying from side to side, a slow, hypnotic rhythm. I am sorry, I whispered, my voice trembling. I brought my hands together in a sompi, the traditional gesture of respect. I meant no disrespect to this sacred place. I ask for your forgiveness, Queen Ning Sovan. For a moment, nothing happened. The humming continued, the shadow swayed. Then the grinding started again. Louder this time, deeper, it was all around me. I looked at the Naga balustrades. In the twilight, their carved stone eyes seemed to glitter, and I swear I saw one of the 7 heads slowly, impossibly, turn to look at me. Panic seized me. I turned to run, but the path behind me was gone. Not gone, but changed. The stone arch had steepened, rising up like a wall, the Naga heads at the entrance now looming far above me. I spun around. The path leading to the other side of the river had done the same. I was trapped in the center of the bridge in a dip that had not been there moments before. The bridge was contorting. It was bending its back. The humming intensified, and a new sound joined it, a terrible, deep cracking and popping, like the vertebrae of some colossal spine being forced into place. The entire structure lurched, throwing me to my knees. I scraped my hands on the rough stone, the scales. That's when I saw it. The shadow in the water was no longer a shadow, it was rising. A vast serpentine form, wider than the bridge itself, was uncoiling from the riverbed. It wasn't stone, it wasn't flesh, it was both and neither. It was a living architecture of mossy rock and shimmering, ethereal scales. 2 huge golden eyes, glowing with their own internal light, broke the surface and fixed on me. They were filled with an ancient, cold intelligence and a hunger that was beyond mortal comprehension. The head rose, water cascading from its stone jaw. It was the head from my dream, the size of a small house, its form both a perfect carving and a living, breathing creature. The bridge I was on was its spine, and it was arching its back to bring me closer to its waiting more. I was paralyzed, there was no escape. This was it, the price for my carelessness, the forgotten offering. My mind went blank with terror, all thoughts of architecture and history burned away by the sight of this impossible god. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end. But in the darkness of my own mind, I remembered the monk's words. A promise, a sacrifice, and my grandmother's words, respect. I didn't beg for my life, I knew it was forfeit. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I stayed on my knees, pressed my forehead to the cold, moving stone of the bridge's back, and I prayed. Not for myself, but for the queen. I thanked her for her sacrifice, for saving the king, for guarding the river. I apologized not for being afraid, but for my ignorance, for the generations who had forgotten her. I offered my life not as a victim, but as a long overdue payment on a debt. The grinding stopped, the violent lurching ceased. A deep, guttural sound echoed from the colossal head before me. It wasn't a roar of anger, but something else, a sound of acknowledgement, of sorrow, perhaps. The golden eyes blinked slowly. The immense pressure in the air lessened. The bridge shuddered one last time and began to lower. The steep walls of stone flattened out into a path again. The way was clear, it was letting me go. I didn't wait to question it. I scrambled to my feet and ran, my lungs burning, my legs pumping on pure adrenaline. I did not look back. I could feel those golden eyes on my back, watching me until I was swallowed by the jungle. I made it to the guest house, threw my bag on my moto and left. I paid Bong Sarith by leaving money on the counter and drove through the night, never dropping below 100 kilometers an hour, until the sun rose over the outskirts of Phnom Penh. Weeks have passed. I am back in my modern apartment, surrounded by concrete and glass, a world away from that black river and ancient stone. I tell myself it was a hallucination, a waking nightmare brought on by heat and suggestion. I try to believe Rith's logical explanations. But the fear is a permanent guest now. I cannot cross a bridge, not even the big, brightly lit Japanese friendship bridge in the city, without a wave of crippling panic. My heart races, and I feel a phantom vibration under my feet. Sometimes, when the air is humid just before a storm, I can smell it. That scent of rotting lotus and disturbed river mud, faint but there. And there's one more thing, something I haven't told anyone, something I can barely admit to myself. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm tired and I catch my reflection in a dark window or the black screen of my computer, my eyes look different. For just a fraction of a second, they aren't their usual dark brown. They are a deep reptilian gold. She didn't take my life that night. She took the offering I gave her, my apology, my respect. But a queen is a queen and a debt is a debt. She let me leave her river, but she did not let me go empty-handed. She put a piece of her hunger, a piece of her ancient, slumbering spirit inside of me. She marked me. I am her memory in the world of men, a reminder that the old promises have not been forgotten, and that the old gods still hunger. So if you ever find yourself on a lonely road in the Cambodian countryside, and you come across a bridge that feels more alive than the jungle around it, be careful where you step. Be careful what you touch. You might just knock a tooth from a sleeping queen, and there are some debts that can never truly be repaid.